Here is Chapter 10 of your Sleep History series. It is written to be expansive, pastoral, and deeply comforting, focusing on the transformation of the American landscape from a place of solitude to a place of connection. The Eternal Messenger, a complete history of the U.S. Postal Service. Chapter 10, Connecting the Farms, the Rural Free Delivery Revolution, 1896. The year is 1896. We have spent much of our journey in the cities, in the bustling streets of New York, the muddy distribution hubs of Chicago, and the gold-dusted wharves of San Francisco. But to understand the true heart of America in the late 19th century, we must leave the pavement behind. We must go where the silence is. Chapter 10 of our history takes us down the long, unpaved lanes of the countryside. It takes us to the vast patchwork of family farms that covered the continent like a quilt. It is the story of how the United States government finally decided to bridge the gap between the town and the field. It is the story of Rural Free Delivery, RFD. To understand the revolution, we must first understand the isolation. Imagine a farmhouse in Kansas or Nebraska or rural Georgia in 1890. It is a wooden structure, weathered gray by the sun and the wind. It sits in the center of a sea of wheat or cotton. The nearest neighbor is a mile away, a speck of smoke on the horizon. The nearest town is 10 miles away. For the family living in this house, the world was small. It was defined by the rising of the sun and the setting of the moon. Their news came from the gossip of neighbors or the pulpit of the church. But for mail, there was only one way: the trip to town. In the era before RFD, the mail did not come to the farmer. The farmer had to go to the mail. The post office was usually a corner of the general store in the nearest village. The postmaster was often the store owner. Behind a wire cage, there were rows of pigeonholes. For a busy farmer, a trip to town was not a casual outing. It was a logistical commitment. It required hitching up the wagon. It required a half day or a full day of travel. In the harvest season, when every hour of daylight was precious, the trip was impossible. In the winter, when the roads turned to frozen ruts or axle-deep mud, the trip was dangerous. So the mail sat. Letters from relatives, newspapers with market prices, seed catalogs, government bulletins, they all sat in the pigeonholes for weeks, gathering dust. This created a communication famine. While the city dweller in 1890 could read a morning newspaper with his breakfast coffee, the farmer might be reading news that was 3 weeks old. He might sell his grain for a low price, not knowing that the market in Chicago had surged yesterday. He was operating in the dark. This inequality gnawed at the social fabric. The Grange organizations, unions of farmers, began to ask a simple, powerful question. If we feed the nation, why are we treated like second-class citizens? If the city man gets his mail delivered to his door for a 2-cent stamp, why must we drive 10 miles for the same service? The resistance was fierce. Shopkeepers in the towns hated the idea. They relied on the farmers coming in to pick up mail because they would buy sugar and coffee while they were there. Politicians argued it would bankrupt the nation. They said the roads were too bad. They said the houses were too far apart. But the idea of connection was too strong to kill. In October of 1896, the experiment began. The location was Charlestown, West Virginia. It was chosen because it was the home of Postmaster General William Lee Wilson. It was a landscape of rolling hills and winding roads. On a crisp autumn morning, 5 riders set out. They were the first rural free delivery carriers. Let us visualize this first journey. It is not the gallop of the Pony Express. It is a slow, methodical plodding. The carrier is on horseback, or perhaps in a small buggy. He carries a map of a route that has never been ridden for this purpose before. He leaves the paved streets of Charlestown and hits the dirt roads. The air smells of fallen leaves and wood smoke. He approaches a farm gate. The farmer is there, waiting. He has been told the government man is coming. There is skepticism in his eyes. He cannot believe that the United States Post Office is actually coming to him. The carrier hands him a newspaper. He takes a letter from the farmer's hand, a letter the farmer wrote 2 days ago but hasn't had time to mail. The carrier cancels the stamp right there with a pencil.
"See you tomorrow," the carrier says. "Tomorrow?" the farmer asks. "Every day," the carrier replies, "except Sunday." The shock of this moment cannot be overstated. It was as if the distance to town had suddenly vanished. The farm was no longer an island. As the experiment succeeded and expanded across the nation, a new figure emerged in the American landscape: the rural carrier. The rural carrier was different from the city counterpart. The city carrier walked, the rural carrier drove. And because he drove, his vehicle became his office. Let us look closely at the mail wagon of the early 1900s. It was often a custom-built contraption. Manufacturers began to sell RFD wagons. They were small, boxy cabins on wheels pulled by a single horse. They were usually painted white or a bright blue to stand out against the fields. Inside, the wagon was a marvel of cozy efficiency. It was a cocoon against the elements. The carrier sat on a padded bench. In front of him was a sorting tray with pigeonholes, just like in the railway cars. The reins passed through slots in the front window, so he could drive without opening the glass. But the most important feature was the stove. Many rural wagons were equipped with a tiny coal or wood-burning stove bolted to the floorboards. In the dead of a Minnesota winter or amidst the winds of the Dakotas, the carrier would be warm. A small pipe poked out of the roof, puffing smoke as the wagon trundled down the lane. The carrier became a rolling branch of the federal government. He was a traveling post office. Unlike the city carrier, who mostly just delivered, the rural carrier provided full service. He sold stamps, he registered letters, he sold money orders. If a farmer wanted to mail a letter but didn't have a stamp, he would simply clip the letter to the mailbox with a few pennies inside a pouch. The carrier would take the money, affix the stamp, and leave the change in the box. It was a system built entirely on trust. The relationship between the rural carrier and the families on his route was intimate. He was the clock by which the farm ran. "Here comes the mailman," they would say, looking at the position of the sun. He was the first person to plow through the snowdrifts. He was often the one who found the sick neighbor or noticed the barn fire. He carried gossip, news, and sometimes off-the-books favors, a spool of thread from town or a bottle of medicine. But for this system to work, the farmers had to do their part. They had to build a mailbox. Before RFD, there were no mailboxes on country roads. Why would there be? When the service started, the government told farmers to put up a receptacle. The result was a chaotic display of American ingenuity and frugality. Farmers nailed up anything that could hold paper. They used old lard buckets. They used empty kerosene cans. They used wooden cigar boxes. They used feed crates. They hung them from fences or nailed them to trees or balanced them on fence posts. It was a nightmare for the carriers. The boxes were full of spiders. They leaked rain. They were hard to open. The sharp edges of the tin cans cut the carrier's hands. So in 1901, the Post Office Department stepped in. They appointed a commission to design the perfect mailbox. They came up with the shape we all know today, the tunnel box. It was made of galvanized steel to prevent rust. It had a curved roof to shed rain and snow. It had a door that pulled down with a heavy latch that could be worked with gloved hands.
and it had the flag. The red signal flag on the side of the mailbox is a brilliant piece of nonverbal communication. If the flag was down, the box was empty or just held delivered mail. If the flag was up, it was a signal to the carrier, "Stop, I have something for you." This simple mechanical arm allowed the carrier to survey the road ahead. If he saw a row of flags down, he could trot the horse past. If he saw a splash of red against the green hedgerow, he knew he had work to do. Let us imagine the sensory experience of the delivery in 1905. It is high summer. The air is thick with the buzzing of cicadas and the scent of clover. The white mail wagon comes rattling down the dirt lane. The horse is swishing its tail against the flies. Clatter, creak, clatter. The wagon pulls up to the galvanized silver box on the cedar post. The carrier leans out of his window. He doesn't get out, that would take too long. He pulls the door of the box down. Squeak. He slides in the mail. A copy of the Saturday Evening Post, a letter from a cousin in Ohio, and the daily newspaper from the state capital.
He snaps the door shut. Clang. He clicks his tongue to the horse. The wagon rolls on. Inside the farmhouse, the rhythm shifts. The children run to the end of the lane. They bring the treasure back to the kitchen table. This brings us to the most profound change RFD brought, the ending of the dark age of information. The item that changed rural America the most was not the personal letter, but the daily newspaper. Before RFD, a farmer subscribed to a weekly paper or perhaps a monthly agricultural journal. By the time he read it, the news was history. With RFD, the farmer could subscribe to a daily paper. The morning edition, printed in the city at 4 a.m., was put on a train, thrown to a platform, picked up by the rural carrier, and placed in the farmer's box by noon. Suddenly, the farmer was synchronized with the rest of the world. He read about the Spanish-American War as it happened. He read about the Wright brothers. He read the weather forecast before the storm hit. But most importantly, he read the market reports. This was an economic revolution. Grain buyers and cattle dealers had long taken advantage of farmers' ignorance. A dealer might come to a farm and offer 50 cents for a bushel of corn, claiming that the market was down. The farmer, having no way to check, would sell. Now the farmer opened his paper. He saw that corn was trading at $65 in Chicago. When the dealer arrived, the farmer could say, "No, the paper says the price is up." RFD put millions of dollars back into the pockets of the rural population simply by providing information. It leveled the playing field between the rural producer and the urban consumer. There was another physical change that RFD forced upon the land: the roads. The post office had a strict rule: good roads for good mail. The government declared that if a county wanted rural-free delivery, they had to maintain the roads. They had to grade the ruts. They had to clear the snow. If a road became impassable, the post office would suspend service. No pike, no post. This threat was a powerful motivator. Farmers who had tolerated mud for generations suddenly grabbed their shovels. County commissioners appropriated funds for gravel and crushed stone. The Good Roads movement that paved the way for the automobile was largely driven by the desire for the mail. The path of the mail carrier became the path of the future highway. As the years passed, the horse gave way to the machine. By 1910 and 1920, the rural carriers began to trade their white wagons for the Model T Ford. The Model T was tough, high-wheeled, and cheap, but the transition was not always smooth. A horse could pull a wagon through 2 feet of mud. A car would sink. There are legendary stories of rural carriers in the early auto age. They were mechanics of necessity. They wrapped chains around their tires. They removed the fenders to stop mud from clogging the wheels. Some even modified their cars with ski attachments on the front wheels and tank treads on the back for winter routes, the snow flyer. But the car allowed the routes to lengthen. A horse route was 20 miles. A car route could be 50 miles. The network tightened. Let us take a moment to reflect on the parcel post, which followed RFD in 1913. Once the wagon was coming to the door, Why not stop at letters? Why not deliver packages? This was the final blow to rural isolation. It ushered in the era of the catalog. Sears, Roebuck and Company in Montgomery Ward became the Amazon.com of their day. A farm wife in North Dakota could browse a catalog and dream. She could order a silk dress, a new set of dishes, a violin for her son, or a cream separator for the barn. She filled out the form, she put it in the mailbox. A week later, the carrier arrived, his wagon sitting low on the springs, loaded with boxes. He brought the department store to the prairie. There is a famous, perhaps apocryphal story of the parcel post era. It is said that parents even mailed their children. In the early, unregulated days of parcel post, the rules were vague. A child, if they weighed less than the limit, 50 pounds, could technically be stamped. There are recorded instances of children being mailed to their grandparents' house a few miles away. The carrier would take the child by the hand or carry the baby, drive them down the road, and deliver them at house. It was a testament to the absolute trust the community placed in the carrier. As we bring this chapter to a close, let us return to the atmosphere of the rural evening. The sun is setting over the fields of 1899. The work of the day is done. The animals are fed. The silence of the countryside returns, but it is a different kind of silence now. It is not the silence of loneliness. The family gathers in the parlor. The oil lamp is lit. The golden light spills over the table. The father is reading the newspaper, muttering about the price of wheat. The mother is reading a letter from her sister in St. Louis. The children are looking at the pictures in a magazine. Outside, at the end of the long driveway, the mailbox stands like a sentry. It is a silver tunnel on a wooden post. The flag is down. It is empty now, but it is full of promise. It is a physical link to the government, to the economy, and to humanity. The road that leads to the mailbox is no longer a dead end. It is an artery. The blood of the nation flows through it. The farmer blows out the lamp. He goes to sleep knowing that tomorrow, around noon, the wheels will crunch on the gravel, the white wagon will appear, and the world will come to visit him again.